I remember it so clearly. We had been here at CFA as lead pastors for about 2 years, and God was beginning to birth something in my spirit that was bigger. It was expansion. It was multiply. And I began to write down on that pad. I drew a circle, CFA Church, and out of it came spokes with little circles. And it was outstations, it was satellites, it was packed churches, it's any number of titles. All I knew was CFA was called to more. We began with Suite 5, and Pastor Doug moving over there to begin with 80 people or so, and over the next several years grew that to well over 200. And in the midst of that, we started adding CFA Logan, CFA Espanol, CFA Bible Way, Mentil, Center City, and of course, Rowan County. But let's go back for a moment, back to the spring of 2006 when I had the yellow pad and I made the circle. The very first outreach, I wrote Harrisburg. As I began to look and pray and drive around, I knew that there was an opportunity for us to do something in that area. I called Pastor Doug and I said, hey, come take a trip with me. And we drove out there. And over the next little bit of times, we began to look at buildings. For whatever reason, the door was shut. And all I can say to you today is good things in our heart don't always equate to God's time. But there is always a God time.
I remember that time in 2007 with Pastor Rick. We knocked on all kinds of doors. We looked for property, made phone calls. I remember having Anna print out a list of CFA attendees with a Harrisburg address, and there's a lot of y'all. Like Pastor Rick said, for whatever reason at that time, the door was closed. And really didn't think too much about it over the next couple of years, but I think it was in 2010, about 3 years later, I was on my way down to Rocky River Coffee on a Wednesday morning just to write and study. I remember clearly, it was a foggy, very foggy morning. I was driving down 49, and just as I entered into the city limits of Harrisburg, there's a sign there that says, "Welcome to Harrisburg." And I remember that the sun came out just about right at that moment. The fog started dissipating, and it was like the Spirit of God started hitting me and nudging me. In fact, so much so that I pulled off onto the side of the road. I grabbed my journal and I started writing stuff about Harrisburg, about CFA Church. I called Pastor Rick a few minutes later. I said, "Pastor Rick, would it be okay if we continued to investigate this Harrisburg thing?" He said, "Sure." So we went through the same process, knocked on doors, looked for property, looked for available locations, checked out different avenues, and again, 3 years later, for whatever reason, the door closed. And you know, Pastor Rick was still right, that good things in our heart don't always equal God's time, but there is always God's time.
I've been at CFA my whole life, but this year was extra special. As you guys know, at the beginning of this year, we gave God our yes. Well, about halfway through the 21 days of prayer, I had a dream. The next day, I got up and it explained the dream to my friend David Dukeson, and in that moment, God spoke. For the next 20 minutes, I was sobbing, just in awe of what God had said. So I decided to come home and talk to Crystal about it.
When Wesley came home and told me about this dream, we decided to pray about it separately. What would this mean for our family and for our church? And we came together and we decided that God was calling us to plant a church in Harrisburg.
So the next day I went into Pastor Doug's office and had no clue that this had been a part of CFA's history. And we agreed in that moment that this was God's timing and this was God's plan. We've continued to see God open doors as we've begun connecting to the community of Harrisburg and have an extra special relationship with Harrisburg Elementary School. And we are just so excited for the future. Church, we are going to continue to give God our yes in our excitement for the future of Harrisburg, North Carolina.